Ladies and gentlemen, this evening on The Unconventional Pastor, Bob Graves gets quite Gnostic about his agnosticism, and he would like for you, the viewer, to be very interrogative. In just a moment on The Unconventional Pastor.
Cool. How are you guys doing tonight? It's good to be back. I got to take my glasses off. I can't see my screen with my glasses that I wear for distance, actually. And I can't see the screen when I'm wearing my glasses. But I'm getting at that age where I actually have another pair of glasses I wear sometimes when I have to see the screen. But I don't usually need them. And anyhow, so... tonight, Joey's right. I wanted to talk a little bit about agnosticism. And although it may sound like if agnosticism means I don't know what to know, that's not always what agnosticism means. And in fact, it can mean a lot of different things. And it's a word that covers a wide range of different applications. And so I just wanted to talk about what some of them are. And I'm curious, of those of you out there who are agnostic, I'd appreciate it if you could even, send in some comments. There's various ways that you can do that. You can send them in on YouTube. I'm not watching it, but I have other people who are watching it right now who then send me some of the comments they want me to make that they think I could make mention of, and there are other ways in which you can send in comments, including an 800 number that is an I don't know. I don't know if it's an 800 number, but Joey will put it on the bottom of the screen from time to time. Various ways that you can leave comments. Now, for many people, agnosticism seems to mean a person who does not know. And there are a lot of ways that you can not know something. For example, someone could ask me if they see something broken and on the floor, and I just entered into a room, and I've never been in the room before, and they ask me, who broke this? And I look at it, I go, I don't know. I have no knowledge about who broke this. That's one form of agnosticism, in a sense. It is a form of not knowing, where one is like, I possess no clues. This is just information that I don't have any access to whatsoever. And let's see, we also have, looks to me like, no, I just, for some reason, sounded like I got a comment, but it didn't turn out to be one. Anyhow, that's one form of agnosticism where somebody, there's an item of apparent knowledge or something there, someone might wonder whether or not you possess knowledge on the topic, and you don't really know. There's another thing another kind of agnosticism that we can talk about, and that is, suppose someone were to ask me, is it possible that planets on a distant star could actually be made up of a composition of materials totally unlike any of the planets that we have here in our solar system? Now, there may be some people who know that. I don't. This is information that I not only don't have, I don't have access to that kind of information. And even if I were to read something, say in Wikipedia or on the interwebs somewhere about it, I don't possess the kind of skill that would allow me to assess whether or not any assertions about that were even credible or not. They could be totally credible and I wouldn't know, or they could be totally incredulous and I wouldn't realize they were just, stuff made up. So there's a real sense here in which another form of agnosticism is not simply, well, I don't know, but not having access to any way of knowing right now, even though there may be other people who do. And another kind of agnosticism, however, would be something kind of like this. Let's just assume for a moment that there is such a thing as a multiverse and that there's some other, space-time continuum that exists in some other way, in some other existence other than this one. And someone were to ask me, how many different deities exist within that particular universe and the intelligent lives that exist there? Or something. Or what if people were to wonder if there might be even intelligent life out there in the rest of this universe someplace, and among those intelligent living beings, there actually might exist certain religions. How many deities would there be out there? Well, that's something that I not only don't know. There's just no way I could ever know that. So in this case, the agnosticism would not only be something where I don't know, it would be something that, not only something that I can't know, it would be something that can't be known by anybody that we could ever know of who could actually have that knowledge. It's unknown. And if there exists no one else out there in the universe other than us, which is a possibility, although I'm not convinced of that, then there wouldn't be anybody who would know that. No one. And so the truth is, there are many reasons why a person might not know something. It could be, first of all, something that isn't clear to them, that they haven't been able to make up their mind about, because as they wrestle with the facts, they're not sure what to conclude. It could involve things where a person doesn't know what to conclude and has no access to the facts or no ability to assess any facts that may be offered, and remains really kind of clueless on the issue, even though admittedly there may be certain people who, because of their training or their background or their specialized knowledge, might actually have some knowledge on the question. That's possible. But then the third kind of agnosticism is one where question could arise where the answer to the question depends upon insights or facts or data that is simply unavailable to anybody. Nobody has access to that data, and as a result, the answer to the question is unknown because it is beyond knowing. And so there's these different kinds of unknowing. There are also degrees of perhaps certainty that always enter into issues. Sometimes we don't know or know something to a degree of certainty. For example, even in a well-taken statistical poll of a survey, we can take a survey or make a poll and find out that within the general population, say 27% of human beings, have bought a widget. I mean, just making stuff up here. Well, given the confidence level, we haven't asked everybody. We don't have any way of guaranteeing that everybody that was asked was honest about whether or not they'd ever owned or bought a widget. We can have a certain confidence level that the conclusions we're drawing from the statistics we've gathered are reliable within a certain degree of certainty. So we can be fairly confident. And so there's sometimes there are things that we know or don't know, and we have a degree of confidence concerning how solid our conclusions are that we do or do not know something. And so we have another axis here, not just three different kinds of unknowing, but degrees of certainty to which that unknowing is resting upon in terms of how firm we are, which means something that is kind of odd when you stop to think about it, unless you think about it a little more, and then it becomes obvious. There can be things that you don't know, and you don't know them. So it's an odd little combination of something you know and along with something that you don't know. For example, whether or not planets in some faraway solar system can be actually made up of ingredients and composites that are radically different from anything that makes up our planets here. I not only don't know, I know that I don't know. I'm very firm in not knowing that. And there may be people out there who actually study this stuff and they actually know, maybe even with certain degrees of probability that, well, it's more likely that there are planets out there that, with ammonium surfaces or atmospheres. I don't know, because I'm just making stuff up here because, as I told you, I don't know. But I firmly don't know. And so consequently, the point I'm trying to get at is this. The state of not knowing something is not always a loose state. It can be at times a rather firm state. When there's something you don't know, you can know absolutely that you don't know it. You can also know absolutely that a certain thing cannot be known, either by oneself or by anyone. Chances are that let's say that some ancient figure that we're talking about has known to have died, but it's not know where they died, and it's not know when they died or where they were buried. Where's their body? Well, it's probably disintegrated by now, but that could be the kind of a question where not only nobody knows, but nobody alive will ever know, even if there was somebody alive at one time who did know. Looks like we do have a comment that did come in. And my eyes are not working well tonight, so I'm hoping I can read this well. Okay, many people use agnosticism as a middle ground between atheism and theism. This way of looking at it is incorrect, though there are only two answers to the question of belief, yes or no. Yes or no. No middle ground. I don't know entirely if I agree with that, and that's from Bruce Wayne. I think that there are people who definitely have doubts. People who believe and definitely have doubts. People who don't believe and definitely have suspicions that maybe. So I do think that there can be people in the middle who aren't sure. In fact, I think that anybody who goes from theism to atheism usually goes through a transition where when they're losing their religion, there's a real disorientation and a lack of solidarity. So however, I would agree that I'd also recognize another kind of middle ground that I would recognize as in some ways not really possessing the kind of integrity it ought to. There are some people who can be afraid of the answer and so therefore don't really pursue it. They know they have doubts. They know it doesn't necessarily make real sense, either conclusion perhaps. And as a result, rather than knowing for absolute certain that they don't know, they may really avoid the question so that they can kind of put it off indefinitely. And maybe Bruce isn't talking about that, but nonetheless, I do think that there are various ways a person might be somewhere in the middle, although it probably not staying there. And to be honest with you, I don't know that any of us stay anywhere completely for forever. We all tend to go through different phases, and usually we only remain solid and true to a particular conclusion when either there is about anything. Either when there is absolutely compelling proof. For example, I think that we can see that 2 plus 2 is 4. And anybody who possesses mathematical skills can be compelled to, well, can I say believe that 2 plus 2 is 4. They know that 2 plus 2 is 4, and they understand the concept, the definitions, even the arbitrary language of math in a sense. And 2 plus 2 is 4. That's just the way it is. And that's probably never, ever, ever, ever going to change for them until they go senile. But part of the reason I'm talking about this is because when I'm honest about my own beliefs, Bruce Wayne would be correct concerning me in this respect, and that is that I definitely either believe or don't believe, and I definitely believe. I call myself an agnostic theist, and that is because I recognize on one level that I do believe in God. I recognize that, and I've experimented with not believing in God, and it doesn't work for me. Why? I don't really know why, and I couldn't even pretend to know why. But I can tell you this: in having given it considerable working and thinking about it and struggling with it, I've come to a particular conclusion. So that my agnosticism is actually what I would call a firm agnosticism, that even though I do believe, I also recognize that the kind of evidence or the sort of facts that would compel me toward one conclusion or the other have come to me. I've come to the conclusion that such facts don't exist. There are no facts. There is no way that anybody can compellingly prove that God exists. No way. And by compelling, I don't mean strong persuasion. That's not what I'm talking about. When we talk about compelling, even under the law, we're talking about things people can make you do. And you don't get a choice. You don't get an option. You can be compelled to pay property taxes, and if you don't do that, they take your property from you and pay the taxes. The option of holding on to property, not paying property taxes in the United States, just doesn't exist, unless somehow a clerical error and great oversight. But there is nothing that can compel. This is where my agnosticism comes from. I would argue that there is nothing that could compel me to believe. There's nothing that could compel me to not believe. And as a result, my theism is something I totally acknowledge is based upon other issues than whether or not there's compelling proof. And I have gotten to the point where, in struggling with this issue for many years, of course, given the kind of struggle that it is, I'm very aware of the fact that many of the notions that people have concerning God are absolutely absurd, in my opinion, and absolutely false. And I have no problem in feeling that there is compelling logic, reason, and evidence that some of these notions that people have about God are absolutely false. So specific notions, I certainly have come to reject. In fact, a great deal of the specific notions of traditional Western Christianity are, to me, nothing but manipulative power plays, taking advantage of people who are culturally gullible and maintained by a power system of religion that intends to, keep them in that kind of a position. And so I kind of reject that kind of theism. But in looking at the overall question, I've come to the point that it's kind of like this. If I were to investigate all of the things that I can compellingly understand to be true, including things like that 2 plus 2, by the definition that we've given to numbers and the definition we've given to the concept of addition, is 4. Of all the things that can be compellingly true, I can know a great number of things, and I can build upon these things to know even more things, to ask even more intelligent questions that can actually have empirical answers, that I can be compelled by the logic and the necessity of the case to find that certain conclusions have to be drawn. And if I were to, not that anyone could ever do this, no one lives long enough, to do this so that I could know all things that are knowable by me, I could travel this road and even ask myself questions about God. And once I have investigated all of the potentially available facts that have the ability not only to persuade, but to compel a particular conclusion, once I have investigated all of them, I find myself coming to the end of the road and I haven't answered the question in a compelling manner. I have not compellingly answered, yes, there is a God. No, there is no God. I have not done that. I have found that of all the persuasive possibilities that might persuade me to believe in God, there's some problems with them. All the concepts that could persuade me to just totally throw away any notion of God, I've got some problems with it. Some of those problems are huge. Some of those problems are not so huge. But nonetheless, none of them ever bring me to the end of the road where if I were to just deal with the facts that must, out of necessity, draw a particular conclusion, I find myself reaching the end of the rope and I have not yet reached the conclusion. It's as if I come to the end of that road and then I can see, well, the road ends, and yet there in the distance are now two roads that lay ahead of me. One of them is the road to theism, and the other one is the road to atheism. And I cannot get to either one of those roads from this road here, where I have never left this road, based upon facts that produce a conclusion by necessity. I would want to argue the only way I can get from this road to either that road over there or that road over there is by finding a way of pole vaulting across the gap or jumping across the gap or whatever kind of metaphor you want to come up with. I can't get from this road to that road without somehow just doing it. And as a result, I find personally that many people who find, and this is something I call the last man standing approach, and something I've seen done many times by people on both sides of this question. Firm theists, I've seen firm atheists do it, and that is this. When you can catalog and point out all of the problems and the failures of producing a conclusion by necessity in the arguments offered by the other side, you can, if depending on how intelligent you are, you can catalog them and pursue them either stupidly or quite intelligently. And I've seen people do both, so that they take it this far. But then they think that since I have completely destroyed the necessity of the conclusion as drawn by the other side, and I'm still standing here, that I must be right. But that's not the way that it works. If we're going to examine all of the weaknesses that can exist in causing those other persuasive ideas to not necessarily by necessity require the conclusion, am I going to take a look at the other conclusion and see if the facts are there in a manner that by necessity require that conclusion? That too requires a certain burden of proof. Looks to me like we have other comments here. Christian Luca, hope everything's going fine. Perhaps we can learn more about ourselves through our experiences, and not knowing something about ourselves is not absolute. It's in transition always. The truth is, I think you're onto something here, Christian, and that is that there is a great deal in life that many situations in life require us to make certain decisions based upon our assessment of what the circumstances are and what the circumstances will be should we make a particular decision or choose a particular option. And sometimes these are decisions that not only we just have an opportunity to make, but sometimes they're decisions we must make. Let's think of the situation of a person who is looking for a job in a rough economy. They have a job offer over at company A and a job offer over at company B. It's a tough economy. Which job is going to be a job they can take on and retire from? And which job is going to end up being with a company that is going to everyone's surprise, go completely under in 5 years? Nobody really knows that. Nobody. Well, there might be a few CEOs who know this company's headed for a nosedive, and I ain't telling nobody until I can sell all my stock. There can be some people who know, but the truth is, a lot of people are in a situation where they're trying to get a job in perhaps even in an industry or a field that is falling apart, and how are they going to know these things? Yet they still must make this decision if they're going to, pay their bills, like their property taxes. But this is a decision they must make, and they must make it based upon the best rationale they can come up with, and based upon the probabilities that seem reasonable to them. And it's possible that they might even come to the point where I can't tell company A and company B. And if they can't really tell, it might be a perfectly rational thing for them to pick the company that locates them where they'd like to live, or some other factor that now rises to the top of having more value than the unanswerable questions. But it is in life that we have to do this, and when we're making these kinds of decisions, we have nothing but experience, nothing but subjective preferences, and sometimes nothing but sometimes there's times when I feel I can handle a particular risky situation more than I can handle a different risky situation, even if the situation I feel confident I can handle is statistically even riskier. If I feel that my ability to ride through that risk is going to be superior to my ability to ride through another risk I'm not as familiar with, I might choose the riskier path. For those reasons. And anyway, so Bruce Wayne comes back with another comment. I love this. I'm glad you were honest on this, Bob. I still don't know why you believe. Well, you see, there's the question. That's an interesting. You don't know why. My question is this. Why does there need to be a why? I don't get it. I can't justify that why makes sense necessarily in this particular question. Okay. In fact, if I'm going to say why, you're basically asking me now to come up with the evidence I'm saying doesn't exist. So I can't give it to you. Well, in a sense, how did I come to believe, and why is it I can't let go of belief? That's an interesting. Perhaps I can answer that question, and that may be where you're headed. Let me finish with a comment, though, which I think is the most important question. I don't think people should believe unless they have a good reason, which you admit you don't have. Well, when I'm talking about a good reason to believe, I'm talking about a compelling reason, a reason that by necessity forces a person to come to that conclusion. I fully admit I don't have that. In fact, I fully admit I stand before you completely naked, and as a theist, that I'm going to try and present to you a fabric of an argument. I am wearing no clothes, none whatsoever. Not in anything that's compelling. However, just because there's nothing compelling does not mean that there aren't subjective reliefs that rise to the surface in light of the absence of anything that compels by necessity. Now, so therefore, there can be an explanation. I don't know that if it's a why, but there can be an explanation for belief. What's my explanation for belief? Well, here again, this assumes that I possess a knowledge about myself that is in some ways accurate. And I don't know how accurate my knowledge of myself really is. It is what it is, but be that as it may, my understanding of how I happen to be a theist is this, that at a very, very young age, before I knew anything about religion, before I knew anything about heaven or hell, in fact, although I attended a church as a child, I never heard anybody talk about heaven or hell in that church. It just never happened. And when I heard people talk about God, and I don't even know much. At the age of 6, I don't recall even the kinds of things they necessarily said. But I do remember between the ages of 6 and 13, I developed a very strong sensation of the presence of God in my life. Not only did I develop that strong sensation of that presence, and I don't entirely understand that or know why, and I can't give you a complete psychological breakdown on it. It is, all I can tell you is that was definitely my experience. I authentically experienced that. Okay, why? Who knows? I don't know why, and I've given it a lot of thought, and I've tried to understand it, and I found that I can come up with explanations that make it bogus, and explanations that don't make it bogus, and when it comes down to the end of it, I don't possess the skills to be able to really eliminate all the possibilities there. But when it comes down to it, between the ages of 6 and 13, not only did I develop a very strong sense of God's presence, I also developed an awareness that the God that I was present of, or at least the sense of that presence, didn't jive with what I was hearing at church. You know, all the doctrine, when they start getting into it. I remember, I think it was I was 12 or 13 when my younger brother was born, and he was baptized, and of course in the Episcopal Church, they one of the doctrines they have in there, not everyone really firmly believes in it, it's just kind of a ritual doctrine, is that of called Baptismal Regeneration, where they're stating at the baptismal there that his having been baptized now makes him a child of God, and that he is now an heir of heaven and all that. And even at the age of 13, I'm thinking to myself, that is just absolutely ridiculous. That's absurd. What a stupid thing for any God to do, I mean, there's plenty of people who can't get near a baptismal font. None of that, but how the hell does getting water on your face or being dipped on and immersed on anything turn you into a child of God? That made no sense to me. So I was very conscious at that time of how the theology that I was hearing was to me absurd and ridiculous, and yet the sense that there was a God, misrepresented as he is in this theology, was nonetheless for me an experience and a sense of that presence. So that's where it began. And I can say that even to this day, and I'm 62, I cannot shake that sense of that presence. But I'll tell you what, I don't see that presence makes the kind of difference in my life that so many people want to claim that it can or should or ought to make. In fact, I can see how that in many ways actually gets in your way. I think too many people construct a theology that causes them to feel that they can lean on this presence in a manner that actually allows them to shirk their own personal responsibilities. Praying for God to help you get a job instead of making yourself worthy of having a job and doing your best to find the one that you can get. Praying for God to help you do this or do that or maintain. It's your life, it's your health, it's your circumstances, it's your situations, and it's your negotiation. And I hope you do well with it. I hope you learn from your mistakes, and all that. But I just don't see the relevance that God has to do with that, or why would he? The most foolish thing in the universe would be for him to be getting involved in any of that. It's your responsibility, not his. And so, those are some of the ideas and notions that as they develop for me that caused me to then have, that's why they call me the Unconventional Pastor. I remember at the age of 13, and further answer the question, and I'll get to John Chakey's question. I love these the comments here, by the way. A result of that was that in that agnosticism, I remember at the age of 13, sitting in the church. At that time, I was still going to the Episcopal Church, listening to a sermon. And I don't remember if my arms were crossed, but certainly my attitude had my arms crossed. I'm listening to the sermon, and I'm thinking, this doesn't make sense. And that was the first time that I ever decided that when I grew up, I wanted to become a minister. because I wanted to be somebody who, in his profession, somehow was either a mentor or a guide, or was somehow involved in helping people to just simply breathe it in and find God, and that this wasn't it. This isn't what this doesn't represent it. This doesn't help anybody as far as I was concerned. And I remember feeling like that I didn't even know necessarily what sort of things would have to be said or what that even looked like. I didn't know at that time anything about it in terms of, other than the fact that I knew that this isn't it. This isn't a message. This isn't anything worthy of even messing around with. And I knew that. And so the very first time in my life that I felt a desire to become a minister was at that point when I was around 13, realizing that I rejected religion, but I didn't reject God, and was looking for a way of doing it. Now, what does that history say? Really, it says nothing. It just says that's my history. Does it compel anybody? Well, just me. And should it compel anybody else? Absolutely not. You have your own experiences. They're your experiences, and these conclusions are yours. You're gonna have to make these decisions for yourself. I don't even want anything to do with it, in a sense. It's not my life, not yours anyway. It's your life, And so, if you have some excellent evidence upon which to make any decision in your life, I suggest you make the decision that you find by necessity you must make. And if there's any other decisions you have to make, I hope you make good ones, useful ones. Maybe even pragmatic ones. Make the decisions that seem to be most useful. Make the decisions that resonate most with who you find yourself to be. Who can argue with you? Anyhow, so there may be an explanation for where that theism came from. Does that compel anybody? Does it explain why to anybody in a manner that they have to somehow accept? No. Does it explain it in a way where some people could say, well, I've studied psychology and I know how people do it, so I dismiss that. Can you dismiss that? Sure, go ahead if you need to. Go ahead. It doesn't matter. It doesn't even bother me. I'm fully aware of the fact that it is dismissible. But I can't. I would argue that I don't see that it's dismissible by necessity. It's just that it's a possible thing to do. So there's a sense here in which, to finish up my comment to Bruce, and that is that I find myself in a position where, in my theism, I can't compel anybody to join me in it, nor can anyone compel me to abandon it. And it's really kind of, pretty much there, whether it's because it's a trait that is something innate within me since childhood that never died, or whether it's a scar from the experiences I've been through that have distorted my thinking. I do know. You don't know either. And so, but that's where I'm at. And I think so long as I'm not trying to poison other people by somehow coming up with some sort of theological system whereby, they're damned, or they just can't have the wonderful, meaningful life I have because they don't have God. When it comes to that kind of crap, I don't need it, you don't need it, and that doesn't have any room in my kind of theology whatsoever. Anyway, on to let's see, we have other comments here. John Chakey says, I don't see any reason to think that a decision on the God question has any consequences. Therefore, deciding between atheism is irrelevant for all practical purposes. I think I'd have to agree with that. In fact, somebody earlier today, I can't remember who it was, said, this isn't really a decision. Either you believe or you don't. Now, we can, let's face it. If I were to come out and say, well, you believe or you don't, I believe. And, is there any depth to it? Well, there's a lot of experience behind it, but is there any compelling depth to it? No. Well, that seems kind of silly, doesn't it? Well, yeah, but the problem is that it's silly in both directions. It is. And so what we do is, I think that we either believe or we don't believe, and we're not comfortable just being that silly and naked. So we try to weave this cloth that is represented by all kinds of apologetics or all kinds of philosophical arguments to make it sound like, oh, no, this is a really intelligent decision. And I want to argue that no, you've gone down a road that may have involved a great deal of vigor and consideration, and you may have learned a ton of things and dealt with them with a great deal of critical thinking. But when you come to the end of that road, there's no decision that you can make concerning this that is of necessity required of you to make. There just isn't. And this is why I consider myself an agnostic theist. And so there's a sense here in which it's kind of like, I've been parting my hair on this side. Of course, I'm bald enough on top that wherever I had a part years ago, it just doesn't exist anymore. I got a big part in the middle. But anyway, Christian Lucas says, I would say, Bob, that we have a multiple selves operating all the time in this physical plane, and our ego craves this. I think maybe you came to realize that the multiple selves are masks. But I'm not really sure what you're getting at here, Christian Luca, other than there's some things here that you're saying that do resonate with me, though, and that is this. I do believe that personal identity is a very inexact experience, that who it is we think of ourselves and who it is we think we are is something that that does lack focus, does lack clarity, and is incapable of coming to strong focus and strong clarity until we become rigidly narrow people, And the truth is that I am who it is that I am is in constant flux and change. I'm not the same person I was 5 minutes ago in many ways, nor am I the person I was a year ago, nor will I be exactly this person that I am now 5 minutes from now or 5 years from now. And so as a result, I'm in constant transition, so that the self that I would describe myself, if I could somehow classify and organize all of that into some sort of some form of empirical features, is in constant flux, in constant development, and there are notions and ideas that I'm gaining on a daily basis, and notions and ideas that I'm losing, and things that I'm forgetting, experiences that are so remote from me that they no longer have any effect on me, experiences excuse me, that have been so significant to me that they remain with me long past their useful purposes in my life. And so there is this sense in that my sense of identity is really very, very fluid and multi-axial. That is, there are many ways that I might see myself based on many different considerations of how to look at myself. In a sense, it's kind of like, when a doctor does a diagnosis, he might take an MRI, he might take an X-ray, he might take a blood test, he might do various other, he might do a physical inspection, and each of these are a different view into the particular problem he's attempting to diagnose, and he might make his final diagnosis based on a process of differential considerations based on all of the different views he's taken. And there's a sense in which we can view ourselves, anthropologically, psychologically, culturally, socially, relationally, where we are. And there's so many different ways we can think of ourselves that it's just, how can I think of I can't even think of all the things that may contribute to who it is I think I am. So that many times my sense of self is really based on, what's in the forefront of my focus at the moment. And that isn't everything. So this is, and I would agree, a kind of a loose notion, far looser than we might like to think. And I don't see that it needs to be, I can have hopes and dreams, goals and plans that can be more precise because, it helps to, if you want to get something accomplished, it helps to focus on the things that get that accomplished and to avoid the things that can inhibit accomplishing it. So goal seeking can be a useful thing, but it's not as if that's the only kind of goal I could have ever had, or the only way I could have spent my time or my life or my endeavors or the accomplishments I wanted to make. More comments here. Let's see. Okay, well, you said, and think maybe that you came to realize that the multiple selves are masks. Well, that's a very interesting that you would say that, because I would agree that who I really am, who we really are, is something that is inarticulate. And the moment that we articulate it, we reduce it from what it really is and turn it into something that, by way of analogy, is more of a caricature of who we are than who we really are. And in that sense, anytime we have a definite sense of who we are, that is a mask. That is something that's a little bit too clean, a little bit too precise, lacks the messiness and the analog strangeness of reality, and has come down to some sort of artificial classification and organization that is part of what we as human beings find ourselves incapable of avoiding. We classify, we organize the world, we try to make sense of it, we try to put it into a system, we try to see patterns even where they don't exist. This is just the part of our psychology, and this would include the way we make sense of the question of God, as well as the way we make sense of the question of self. And this is something that I would even say is I'm a bit agnostic about. Know yourself. You can know things about yourself. You can spot traits and possible, but to know, I would even argue that to know yourself so perfectly is unnecessary, and probably to think that you know yourself that well would be unhealthy. To a degree, it's far more capable of being a person who has a certain flexibility, willing to face all things. But let me kind of bring this back to the notion I began with. I find that agnosticism, as I have embraced it, is for me a position that I have fallen into, in some ways out of preference, in some ways out of frustration in being able to force myself to go any other place. But it has also brought me to a point where I think I can say this, that I think that there are many people out there who are atheists, not agnostics, but atheists, who, I find that to be a perfectly respectable conclusion for them to come to. There are people out there who are theists, and I can find that also to be a perfectly respectable conclusion to come to. However, when I find people out there who are either atheists or theists, who want to then assert that the other conclusion is the unjustified conclusion, unlike theirs, I find myself feeling as though, at least as far as my experience goes, I've struggled with this road, and I found I came to the end of the road when I was done with all the facts I could work with, and I still couldn't find anything to, out of necessity, force me to make a conclusion. I just had to decide that, I was comfortable. And I'll tell you what, I'm independent enough that even though most people who try to be as intellectually rigorous as I try to be, although most of them are atheists, I don't care. I'll be a theist, and if they think that I'm somehow abandoning the intellectual rigor, that's just too damn bad. I don't care. I am not going to be compelled to kind of join the other people, lest I be identified as one of those people who's really an idiot, not really smart or something. No, that's where I'm at. That's honestly where I'm at, and that's where I'm going to honestly declare myself to be. But I realize that that what's brought me there lacks the compelling aspect, and I have become an agnostic in the sense that I've not only come to the conclusion that from the standpoint of knowing, I don't know. I've come to the conclusion that nobody can really know. You can have your conclusions. You can feel as though, well, since this, I just don't see the reason or the purpose of it. And given the kinds of things human beings have done with religion, I don't blame you. And yet there's other people who have found that that in the avenues of faith in their life, that there have been many extremely meaningful moments that where they're comfortable. That I say, fine, let them be comfortable. And in fact, I remember one time talking with somebody about the issue of, religious freedom, all that. I said, well, suppose somebody wants to have a religion where they believe in human sacrifice. Don't you think we should have laws that outlaw human sacrifice? And my answer is, I think laws that outlaw murder are sufficient. We don't have to acknowledge that they believe in human sacrifice or even deal with the issue. If they're killing anybody, we can charge them with murder. It brings me down to a point where I realize that the agnostic that I am is an agnostic who, as far as I can go, I see some uncomfortable problems that prevent me from taking either the theist or the atheistic position based upon necessity of the facts that compel me to find I must take that conclusion. I find it lacks. And yet, there either is or isn't. And I therefore find that I have to just be honest about this is where I'm at. I can't budge from it, nor can I pull you into it. And so, there we are. And that kind of explains my agnosticism. Well, thank you for all of these comments for Bruce and Christian, and I appreciate that. And it helped to clarify perhaps ways in which things that I'm saying do require some sort of clarification, and maybe even further discussion. That'd be great. But anyhow, we'll catch you next time around, and thank you for listening. I'm Bob Graves. They call me the Unconventional Pastor, and I'll be back again on Wednesday. See you then.